Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, the show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
I'm Paul Vogelzang, and I want to welcome you to today's episode where we venture into the heart of modern espionage with an exclusive interview with returning guest Mark Greaney that promises to be as thrilling as the stories we are about to discuss. We are diving into the shadowy realms of artificial intelligence, international intrigue, autonomous robot fighters, and the relentless pursuit of justice with none other than Mark Greaney, the mastermind behind the New York Times #1 best-selling series, The Gray Man. In the latest electrifying installment of Mark Greaney's book series on The Gray Man, titled The Chaos Agent, we find our indomitable hero, Court Gentry, entangled in a web of danger that stretches across continents. From the neon-lit streets of Japan to the historic alleys of Boston, a sinister plot unfolds targeting the world's foremost experts in robotics, artificial intelligence, and autonomous warfare. The stakes, nothing less than the future of warfare itself, as the race to harness AI as a weapon threatens to redefine the battlefield. Mark Greaney's work is not just a foray into the worlds of spies and shadow operations, although it is a wonderful, thrilling story. But Mark Greaney's work is a deep dive into the ethical mazes and technological quandaries that define our times. Again, this is a fantastic story. You'll be entertained, but you'll also learn, because Mark Greaney's meticulous research, combined with this vivid storytelling, invite us to ponder the implications of AI and its weaponization, not as a distant science fiction, but as a palpable force shaping the geopolitical landscape that Court Gentry aims to fight. Today, we will peel back the layers of Mark Greaney's creation, Court Gentry, and explore Court's high moral standards, a character in Court Gentry who navigates the murky waters of espionage with the unwavering integrity and a touch of wry humor. We'll discuss the genesis of The Chaos Agent, the real-world inspirations behind its gripping plot, and how Mark Greaney keeps readers on the edge of their seats while making them think deeply about the world around them. So, dear listeners, prepare for a journey into the heart of darkness and light, where the lines between right and wrong blur, and where the only certainty is the relentless pursuit of truth. This is an episode you won't want to miss as we explore the thrilling, thought-provoking world of Mark Greaney's The Gray Man in his new book, The Chaos Agent. Well, Mark Greaney, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me back, Paul.
I always enjoy talking with you. I went back, we've talked 6 previous times. This is actually our 7th conversation about your books. I'm such a huge fan, and we're talking on President's Day. Your newest book, The Chaos Agent, subject of our interview today, comes out this month. I think it's February 20th, so I think we're actually just right in line. Tomorrow the book is released, and Congratulations. I hope you're well, hope family's well, and my gosh, I just want to jump right in and talk about The Chaos Agent with you.
Great. Yeah, no, we're all doing great. Thank you.
Good. Well, as I say, I'm a fan. I really enjoyed this book, and I really, in particular, enjoyed how you have woven in the subject of artificial intelligence, because that's something that I think is on so many of our minds. We're thinking about this. We're living it in so many ways, and I wonder how you decided to kind of balance this. Because the story is very accessible, but it could have drifted a lot of different directions, not under your hand, but it could have made its way in a lot of different places, and it might have even been confusing at times or alarming. It wasn't. The book is fantastic. What did you do to make sure that balance, that line was maintained for you?
Well, it was a topic that I was interested in, but knew very little about: artificial intelligence and robotics, and the melding of the two of them. I sort of got the idea just watching people like Elon Musk and other mega billionaires who have these commercial artificial intelligence labs and are developing this cutting edge technology and capability. So, I am not a scientist. I'm not a computer programmer. So I wasn't really worried that I was going to put in too much detail. I mean, I definitely did a lot of research to get the knowledge up where it needed to be to write about it. But, I wrote several books with Tom Clancy and then some Jack Ryan books after Tom died. And, in the olden days, they called those techno thrillers. And they're not really techno thrillers anymore because we're not, when we write these books, we're not going 5 pages in on how a bomb detonates or whatever. I think readers want something different now. I think that worked really well in the 80s and 90s, but now I think people want a slightly faster paced story, and that lends itself to, the fact that I am not a genius in these things. So I'm just learning what I can and putting it in there. I mean, there was nothing I kept out of the book because I thought it was too arcane. I didn't go into, what deep neural networks are and, some of the nuances of machine learning that I did learn while I was doing the research. But, I wanted to keep it a fast-paced spy novel, but it does have technology at its core. Not a science fiction, but it has, emerging technology at its core.
Again, congratulations, because the book does move along at just this great pace. I really enjoyed it and just devoured it. At one point you write, AI will be smart enough to be able to hire, threaten, trick, coerce, manipulate, empower, disempower. It'll be smart enough to control humanity. Humans will be the weak link. Amazing stuff. You just talked a little bit about your research. The depth, though, is really impressive. And I wonder if you confirmed that. Are we really just going to succumb to all of this as humans? Because it can be a little disconcerting, but it makes for a powerful story here.
I thought about my artificial intelligent agent at the center of this book, who is one of the villains in the book. I thought about, let's say you have one of these big, large language models like ChatGPT or whatever, but more advanced than that, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of where we actually are, because ChatGPT 3.5 or whatever is online is a few a few cycles behind of where the technology is. But I thought about having something like that and giving it a mission, and then also giving it access to offshore bank accounts and dark websites where you could hire assassins. And basically, this artificial intelligence agent in the book becomes its own sort of intelligence organization, like a CIA or a KGB or something like that. Its objective is to socially engineer people to do its bidding, because it is only a brain. It physically can't do things. Now, obviously, in the book, it works with robotics to a large degree, but there's a lot of things that robots can't do. So I had this idea that if you had this really advanced, and when I say really advanced, again, I think it's probably capabilities that exist, that they're just not publicly readable, available right now. But it's something that could do a lot of damage, and if its mission was to, let's say, keep itself alive, it would go after the people that were trying to dismantle it, for example. So I kind of had this big lofty idea that it got bigger and loftier the deeper I got into the capabilities that this technology possesses. So it was it was scary for me to write as well.
Yeah, it almost it can be overwhelming, and it certainly was overwhelming for our hero, Court Gentry, who is known for his physical ability, but he has to adapt quickly. He has to face these enemies that are put in place and in front of him by AI. And so it just seemed like he really had to grapple with this force, and he began to understand it too. And so you really give him a villain that we haven't seen before, because it's this combination of a brain with a very powerful robotic force that comes at him from all directions, and he's really he's at his wit's end and trying to get a handle on it.
Yeah, so I wanted to not change Court for this book. I didn't want him to be this technical whiz kid mastermind that's able to solve everything and deal with everything in a different way than he normally does. So you'll see in the book, the first time he sees one of these AI-powered robots coming at him, he's like, well, they're not bulletproof, and he shoots it, and then he turns around and he's like, actually, this one might be bulletproof. He's not, he doesn't know anything more about this than the average person. So there's other characters in the book. It takes a village. There's other characters in the book that sort of do some of the, like, working out some of the mystery, and Court is very much involved and very, he's a key component of, fighting this foe. But he has the same tools in his toolbox that he has in every other book when he's, going up against the Russian mob or the Mexican cartels. He doesn't have any new skills that are going to help him specifically with robotics and AI. And that's the way I wanted to write it. I wanted, not that he's a Luddite, but, sort of a guy that doesn't really use technology as much. And he's thrown into this, and he has to kind of figure out his ways to adapt and overcome and get help.
Yeah, Court returns in a big way, and so does his very dry sense of humor, which, as I say, we've talked enough. I know you have such a nice sense of humor, too. How do you balance that, though, in your writing to make sure to keep it tense but still inject that humor so that it enhances and doesn't detract from just the overall gravity of the situation because it's tense?
Well, the short answer for that is my editor, Tom Colgan, saves me from myself multiple times each book, because there will be times where I will put a line in there just because I think it's really funny and it's really, it'll engage the readers, and then he'll come back. He actually doesn't have to correct me that much anymore because I can hear his voice when I think of something clever in there, and so I sort of am following his lead even without him having to say anything. But yeah, I think the first few times in earlier Gray Man books where I'd write a few semi-funny things and kind of get away with it, and then I up the ante with a line or a scenario, and more than once Tom, my editor, has come back and said, this looks like a line out of an 80s Schwarzenegger novel. And as soon as he says that, I'm like, okay, I understand exactly what you mean. I went too far, stabbing a guy against the wall and saying, stick around or something that like I love that stuff.
Yeah, I love that.
You have to use it really sparingly.
Sure.
And so I've always wanted my books to have lightness and darkness, because when I have done, I'm not former military or special forces or SWAT or anything like that, but when I've trained with these people, there's an amazing gallows humor that they have that is really, I wouldn't have believed it. I would have thought, being around these guys in the bunkhouse and, out on the range, I would have thought that it was made up, like something out of TV, the way that they can joke about things that you and I might not joke about and stuff. So I believe that it's real. The important thing is you have the right character saying it. Sometimes I will set up, my arch villain for a quip, and then I'll go oh, that just doesn't really work for this or this part of the story. So it's a dance. I would put more in. I would put too much in, if not for Tom. So I think I'm lucky to have him.
I love it too. I really enjoy it. I also enjoy Zoya, who returns, and there's a really special relationship between Zoya and Court. And so talk to us a little bit about this partnership, this relationship, because she really makes some contributions to the story, to the team, and there's trust there between them. There's a couple of secrets that, kind of are there right at the very start, but they're survivors. Let's put it that way. And so they end up prevailing. But talk a little bit about Zoya again, because she's a favorite of mine.
Yeah. So all in all, with all the characters, the psychology of these characters is really, really interesting to me. The action scenes feel like they write themselves. That's always sort of been something that's been a little bit easier for me. And the tougher stuff is like really getting in the heads of these characters and laboring to, I think of myself as an actor sometimes and go like, what would this character be thinking? How would they respond to this? And so when I put Zoya in the series, she starts out as an antagonist, or she starts out at odds with Court in an earlier book, and they've developed this relationship. And I've written Court in a way that I'm trying to be honest to his backstory. In other words, he doesn't have a lot of training. He's not socially an adept person. He's very, very paranoid for 150 good reasons that I've created over the years. So instead of just, having him just be this devil may care, playboy guy, he's wired a lot tighter than that. So with Zoya, he's let his guard down, and they have this relationship, and they have this mutual trust. And the book opens up, like you said, the book opens up with them together and sort of living off grid, and they both say this is the best time of their life. But Court sort of senses something's coming, and then he finds out that Zoya is not being honest with him about something. And it might just be a little thing, but again, it's the psychology of the situation. I was just thinking, like, if you had let your walls down, you were in all this danger, and you let your walls down for one person, and then something they said didn't coincide with what you knew to be true, how quickly would you build those walls back up, and how defensive would you get about it? And so that's what I was trying to do there with the character. Zoya is as interesting a character to me as Court is, and in different books she's had larger roles and smaller roles. She has a large role in this one. This might be the only book where Court and Zoya are shoulder to shoulder through just about the entire book. Usually they're on two different missions and they might thread together at some point. But this one, I really wanted to show them as a couple trying to deal with this together. And that was fun. It was different. I like it when my books are different from the last.
Our guest, of course, is author Mark Greaney. Get ready, audience, because February 20th, 2024, The Gray Man returns, and the name of Mark's new book is The Chaos Agent, another must-read thriller from New York Times best-selling author Mark Greaney. Mark, thank you so much for coming back. Thanks for this new book. My audience's favorite 61-year-old makes a big appearance kind of midway. I'm talking about Matt Hanley. I enjoy Matt's role. He also has a very unique, special sense of humor and a real interesting understanding of Court. At one point, Court says they have this great exchange, and Court says, "Why would I be here to kill you?" And Matt replies, "I don't know. Killers appear in people's darkened houses. On rainy nights, normal people ring the effing doorbell." Court says, "I'm not entirely normal." So what is it? What does Matt know? And what is it about Court that it's not exactly normal? Because that it's also this really interesting nuance that you've developed with Court.
Yeah, if you're going to write a story and your hero kills people for a living, you can do it one or two ways. It can be sort of a two-dimensional kind of square-jawed tough guy, or it can be a character who also has a lot of vulnerabilities. Because it seems to me, I'm only guessing, but if I were an assassin, my brain would be a little bit scrambled as far as right and wrong and morality. And he's a character where, at the center of him is his moral code, and he's not a bad guy, but I again, it goes back to the psychology and thinking about, you created these characters, you created these improbable situations. So it's my job to investigate as honestly as possible. And so Matt, who's known Court for 15 or 20 years, knows that he is, something of an oddball because of the fact that he was plucked out of prison by the CIA when he was a teenager and trained up to be a singleton asset. So he's basically off on his own without a net and really without much supervision. And then he was put in a rendition squad that was like very, that they called the goon squad, that was very, very involved in stuff in the war on terror. So he's had all this, and then finally he becomes a killer for hire. So all these things make him who he is, and Matt has Court's number. Like they're friends, but Matt is definitely a guy who would use Court as a tool, and Court knows this. But I think their relationship is fun to see develop throughout the books. I have this big thing where I don't want to necessarily put all my known characters into every book, and that comes from working on the Tom Clancy novels. You have a big, big group of beloved characters, and I'm a Clancy fan too, so I love them too. But when you're writing it, you're like, okay, I need a role for Dominic, I need a role for Kathy Ryan, So when I did the Gray Man books, and I started to get these other characters that would show up and survive or become his sort of sidekicks or friends, I decided, okay, I'm not going to be locked into having, the whole gang get back together for each book. So Matt's not in every book, but when he's in, it's a lot of fun for me to write.
Yeah, fun for me to read too. And again, I know our audience just always enjoys Matt and his special relationship with Court on many psychological levels. I love your books for so many reasons. One of the things that I always get from these books is I'm entertained, but I learn. And so I just really want to congratulate you on the meticulous research, the authenticity. I know you well enough now, after interviewing you several times, that you go to these locations. And I wonder, in this instance, with respect to AI, researching it, were you going to visit some of these robotic plants? Did you actually get to interact with some of this? Because again, the research, the telling of the story is so realistic.
Thank you. I tried and was pretty much shut out of going to research labs. So I did all the research. I read about 5 books, and one of the books I read like 3 times. And then I listened to, I think I estimate about 300 hours worth of podcasts about robotics, artificial intelligence, military ethics. And I read a lot of think tank papers, a lot of news articles, and several like really boring government publications that had some kind of kernel of interesting information in there. And I just built it up from there. As far as the robotics, and there's several different types of lethal autonomous weapons, which an LAW is just anything that on its own without human input can search for, discriminate against, identify, and engage and kill a target. The robots that are in the book are all existing real robots, even if they're just prototypes, or even if they're doing something in the book that maybe they haven't done before, they do exist. So there are these quadruped, 4-legged robot dogs with 6.5 Creedmoor rifles on their backs. That exists. And there are drones that can ferry these robot dogs, fly them around and drop them off like a payload. And there are these bipedal, robots that look like you or me that Boston Dynamics makes, and they have shown them with guns before, and they're really, really scary. So all this stuff is real. And it took a lot of research and, just sort of imagining the worst case scenario of all this stuff. So it was actually a fun book to research because I knew so little about this, but it was all very fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating to me too. The other aspect of this, and in particular, a quote I just really enjoyed, from the book, you say the Chinese have stolen so much artificial general superintelligence machines that think like humans. The machines teach themselves. They write their own code because there is no will in the West to go all in on autonomous weapons. And you make this, you write this quote, and then you make this in close reference to this idea that AI could be the biggest game changer in warfare since gunpowder. And did that come up in some of the material that you researched? Because that's pretty darn powerful. That's pretty disconcerting there.
Yeah, absolutely, and it did. Mm-hmm. And they say that war is the ultimate accelerant of innovation. Mm. And of all the things that are pushing AI forward, and there's a lot of commercial, and there's a lot of good things and a lot of beneficial things. I always want to say that when I did my research, I went looking for the dark side. So people are like, so how do you feel about AI? I'm like, you're asking the wrong guy, because if it was beneficial to society, I was not interested in it. I was only looking at this. But artificial intelligence agents have invented novel toxins for chemical weapons on their own. They're able to teach themselves, rewrite their own code. They can rewrite lines of code that limit them in some way. So there is this fear of it growing and growing into a singularity moment where, the self-improvement cycles are going faster and faster, and it's pulling itself up by its bootstraps because it can create its own knowledge and synthesize its own data, which means just basically wargaming against itself to teach itself new things. And all this is very scary and ominous. And you mentioned China, like President Xi has said that science and technology are the main battleground against the West in the future. So they're taking this very, very seriously. And the United States, and this goes back to the ethics, the United States military has always said we will have human-machine teams. So a human will always be making the decision whether or not to kill. And the Chinese probably aren't going to be doing that. They're working really hard to develop lethal autonomous weapons and AI capabilities. And the problem is, once they have something that does not require a human, the human is the weak link and the slow part of the whole thing. There's a thing called neuromuscular delay. So the fastest human in the world still takes more reaction time than a computer. And we've seen simulators, artificial intelligence flying in simulators against real U.S. F-16 pilots and completely destroying the human beings because the AI can do thousands of calculations a second. It does not care about coming back home to its wife and children. It doesn't care about G-forces, or it's all the capabilities of the aircraft and not a body that it has to worry about. So everything in the book, and again, going back to ethics, I'll just wrap with that. We have, the U.S. is trying to apply ethics to this and say, well, we need to keep humans involved. But once we're up against an adversary that doesn't, it might be too late for us to retool that. And I think the ethics will go out the window the second, we have lethal autonomous weapons making thousands of decisions a second going up against American human beings.
Mark Greaney, just such a fascinating book. Of course, the author of the new book, The Chaos Agent. Just one final question for you. Again, I know you're super busy, and I always I could talk to you for a long, long time, Mark, but I know that we've got you for just a little bit of time. So final question. I wonder, are there any misconceptions about AI that you wanted to address in the book and through your storytelling, in The Chaos Agent, that we need to know about so that we can be thinking about AI and understand it well enough in terms of our adversaries in the world?
Well, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I keep kind of bouncing back to the same thing. And so I've been on doing a press tour for a little bit, and I get a lot of people saying, well, they're not worried about artificial intelligence because they went on ChatGPT 3.5 and asked it to write a story for them or a paper, and it screwed some stuff up. So they're like, how is this a threat to me? And I want to agree with them. I wish it was true, but I point out to them that this technology is in its absolute infancy, and it's only going to grow. And as it is now, it may have screwed up your paper, but it is able to generate human level performance on the SAT and the GRE and the bar exam. So it is very, very capable as it is now. And computing power that is focused on building this most advanced artificial intelligence has grown 10 billion% since 2010. And the computing power doubles like every 6 to 9 months. And the amount of data used by artificial intelligence doubles every 2 years. So, where are we going to be in 2 years? Where are we going to be in 5 years? I think it's all very, very important. And so the misconception is that a lot of people have is like, oh, this is kind of novel and this is fun, and it might screw up our election because misinformation and disinformation can be like blown up with artificial intelligence. But I think the problems are bigger than that, or the challenges ahead are bigger than that. And I hope people take that away from this book.
Thanks for all your hard work on this book. And I know my audience is just going to love it. Of course, the title of the book is The Chaos Agent. Mark Greaney's been our guest again. The storyline is fantastic. Court's there. Zoya's there. Of course, our friend Matt Hadley is there. But it's just this thrilling book in all ways. And then you have this really wonderful exploration of AI and ethics. So, Mark Greaney, thank you for talking to us and for doing all of this wonderful work and for just another bestseller. So congrats and my best to you.
I appreciate it, Paul. Thank you for having me.
My thanks to New York Times #1 best-selling author Mark Greaney and his new book, The Chaos Agent, available today. The Chaos Agent, Mark Greaney, and his wonderful way of unveiling the future of espionage and AI is fantastic. I just encourage all of you to read this fantastic book, The Chaos Agent. My thanks to you, our wonderful audience here on radio and podcast. Please be well, be safe, and let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Not Old Better Show. To find out more about all of today's stories or to view our extensive back catalog of previous shows, simply visit notold-better.com. Join us again next time as we deep dive into some of the most fascinating real-life stories from across the world, all focused on this wonderful experience of getting better, not just older. Let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show.